If you're an agency or organization interested in having BikePed Portal host your manual or short-term duration counts, this tutorial is to help you understand the framework for organizing and formatting the required metadata into data. Template metadata and data files can be found on our documentation site. We'll start with an overview of the process of adding data into BikePed Portal. First, identify all your data sources and then assess how these data are stored. For example, are these data stored as PDFs, multiple worksheets within an Excel file, or a single CSV file representing multiple sites, or looking and seeing how the format has changed over the years? This will help you plan on how to move forward. Additionally, you will also need to fill out a contributor agreement form with BikePed Portal. This ensures that we have a point of contact and that the data being shared will not be used for for-profit purposes by any party. To submit your data into BikePed Portal, you will need to provide at least two types of files. One is your metadata file, and the other is your data file. Metadata is data about the data, which in this case refers to the data about the location of where the counts are being recorded. The metadata attributes are based on the TMG non-motorized count data format. We will cover the metadata attributes in this tutorial first, and then how to fill out the template later. The data are a separate file from the metadata file. Not only does this help make the process more manageable, but the requirements for the data file are different from the metadata. More than often, the data file is reformatted where one row of data equals one unique observation, and this can be a time-consuming process. Again, you can find the data template file on the documentation site, and we will cover the data attributes in this tutorial as well. Once the metadata and data are added to BikePed Portal, that data will be made publicly available on the website almost immediately. Your organization will also have access to your data through a user login site, which we will demonstrate at the end. On to understanding the different metadata attributes and how to organize and format your metadata. A more detailed description and additional examples can be found through the documentation site. And if you have any questions about the metadata or data or any part of this tutorial, feel free to contact us. You are currently viewing an example metadata schematic, where one location can represent multiple types of counts. There is a one-to-many relationship with different levels and categories of detail. Starting with the most broad description of a location, the segment area. The required attributes of the segment area are the name of the location, the start time, which is the first date of data ever recorded at that location, city, county, state, functional classification, route sign number, and organization, which is the organization leading the count effort. For example, let's take up a made-up location in San Francisco. The location is 23rd Avenue, north of Geary. This is a simple segment area name defined by the user, and it is descriptive. And let's say the first day of data ever recorded was in December 1989. Please note the format of the start time: year, month, day, hour, minute, second, and most importantly, the time zone. The time zone is really important to include because we have multiple locations located throughout the country. In addition, we still use daylight saving time. Next, the city and county are San Francisco. The state is California, and the functional classification is local. If you don't know the functional classification, we have a link through the documentation site that can assist you in finding that information for each state. There's no route sign ID, so we set it to 0. And then the organization leading the effort is the city's DOT. The pink line is pretty much your screen line, so anyone crossing the pink line is counted. The next level of metadata is the facilities information. The required attributes for facilities is the type of facility and a user-defined description. There are other attributes that can be included depending on how descriptive you want to be and how granular the count data you want it to be. We'll give you a couple of examples. With the San Francisco example, we can identify at least two types of facilities, sidewalks and the roadway. And again, you can add additional information. And in this case, if your counts differentiate between the sides of the street, then you can end up with four facilities. Sidewalk east side, sidewalk on the west side, east side of the roadway, and the west side of the roadway. Going back to the metadata structure, we started off with one segment area and now have four facilities. At this point, there would be 4 rows of metadata in the metadata file for this example. After the facilities level, we move to the flow level information. The required attributes for flow are the direction of travel and the flow type, meaning the mode of travel. This could be pedestrian, bicycle, e-scooter, personal mobility device, equestrian, off-road, and other. If there is another mode type that isn't represented, please let us know. Using the San Francisco example, we will demonstrate how one facility can represent multiple types of flows, and this really depends on how the data were collected or how you intend to collect count data. You can get really granular or keep it aggregated, and that really depends on what you're trying to answer. So in this example, you can see how there can be two types of flow for one facility based on the side of the sidewalk and the direction of the traffic. Pedestrians traveling north and pedestrians traveling south on the east side of the sidewalk. Or you can have one flow type to one facility where you combine the direction of travel, in this case for pedestrians only. Here, you can see how one facility can have 4 different flow types based on the mode of travel: scooters and bikes, and the flow of traffic, north and south. We have occasionally seen this level of granularity when trying to capture if and when people travel in the wrong direction, as this can be a safety issue. Or you can combine the mode of travel and separate direction of travel. Here, you're combining bikes and scooters traveling, but differentiating between the direction of travel, north and south, and south. And lastly, in this example, you're combining direction of travel, but keeping the mode of the travel separate. So as you can see, you can have multiple flow types for a single facility and multiple facility types for a single segment area. Once you've determined the segment area, facilities, and flow, we then need information about the detector. This isn't really a level of data compared to the other levels. The detector is uncoupled from all the other metadata information. And this is primarily done because if you're using automatic detectors for short-term duration counts, you can use a director multiple times over multiple locations. And this will help you in the future if you're finding out there's something faulty with a piece of hardware and want to trace back to where it might have started drifting. Or you're switching to a new detector because your old detector becomes obsolete. And the remaining information doesn't necessarily change. It's only the detector. This also keeps track of who owns the detector. So in the next example, you can see how the organization is listed as one of the required attributes. And the same organization listed under the detector is the same as the organization listed in the segment area. The jurisdiction in this case is filled out is if the detector is owned by another agency. For example, a state DOT might be loaning the hardware to a local DOT. In the case of manual counts, you will typically fill out the bulk of the attribute information as manual count. The other information is relevant for automatic counters. After you have your detector information filled out, the next level of metadata is categorized as the flow detector. The required attributes for flow detector are the lat and long, start date, end date, and the meta ID. The meta ID is a user-provided ID unique for that row of metadata. Going back to our San Francisco example, tracing the relationship from the segment area level down to the flow, combining it with the detector information, you will see that you can have multiple flow detectors. So in this particular instance, we have this first flow detector to represent the northbound travel for bikes and scooters along the west side of the roadway. And then we have a second flow detector to represent the southbound travel for bikes and scooters along the west side of the roadway. So here we have an example of two flow detectors to one segment area. This would be two of the many distinct observations at one location. So you would have many rows of data or metadata in your final file. For each flow detector, there is a unique meta ID down here. This ID is unique and will be used as a key for the count data. Moving on to the structure of the data file. The required attributes for your count data are relatively simple compared to the metadata, but don't let that fool you because it can be a very time-consuming process to organize and reformat your data depending on how your original data files are stored. You will need the meta ID that you created for your metadata file to represent the counts that were observed for that particular type of data. This will become more clear as we move along this tutorial. You will also need to provide the start time, end time, measure period, and volume. In our previous metadata example, we had two meta IDs that were created in the metadata file to represent two of the many possible flow detectors. These counts represent 15-minute bins or a total of 2 hours for two different flow detectors. It looks relatively simple compared to the metadata, but again, this can be a very time-consuming process depending on the original format of your data. Now that we've gone through the metadata and data framework for BikePed Portal, let's look at the metadata and data template files. Here is an example of the metadata template file that you can find on our website or the documentation website. You will notice that down below, right here, there are two worksheets. So you have one worksheet that has required attributes, and then you have a secondary worksheet, the optional attributes. The first row data are the name of the different attributes. You will see that here we have segment areas dot segment name. The first part of the name is the categorical level of the metadata, and the second part is the actual attribute name. So with our San Francisco example, we have the segment area name right here. We have the start time listed here. Also, please note, again, the format of the date and time, year, month, day, hour, minute, second, and time zone. Because this is Excel, the timestamp can often be pre-formatted, or there can be funny things that happen with the formatting with Excel files. So when you download the file, this particular or any sort of timestamp, any attribute requiring a timestamp is already formatted to a character type. So if you see anything that's wonky or something has changed and it's not exactly following the format that's required, you can go over to this particular menu option and you can pick the character or the class type as character or text. Next here you have San Francisco as your county, and then you have your state, you have your city name, you have your functional classification, and in some cases, the attributes are already pre-populated with a drop-down menu for the possible accepted um, variables. So here for functional classification, these are the only functional classification types that can be listed. And then here we have the root sign number 0 because it's not there. You can put the org name. This is fake, made up. And then here you have the facility type. Similar to the functional classification, we have a drop-down menu already provided for the possible facilities that are available. If you have a facility type that isn't in this list, or as things get updated and changed, if it's not listed, please let us know ahead of time so that we can make those appropriate changes on our end. Next is the description. Again, this is a descriptive description that is user defined. And then here we have an example of an attribute that you can include. It is optional, and we also pre-populate with the drop-down menu of either true or false. These are true, false, Boolean types. If you, for example, in our San Francisco example in the metadata, we also included the side. So here we have facilities. We have all the other optional attributes that can be added. So we have facility side, and if you want to add that, that is as simple as copy that row, go back to your required, and then here we can insert your copied cells right here, and then you can pick whatever facility side you want. North, I guess we had one that was east. We had another one. If you're on the east side, you're traveling north, and if you're on the right, so you can have east again. If your flow is south, you're going west. So this is how you can add an optional attribute, stick it in the required section. And then you have the different flows. So here you can fill out the different flows that you're capturing. So in this row of data, you're capturing only bicycles as your flow type, because that's true. Oh, and also scooters, because that's true. Everything else is false. And then for this flow type, you're only doing pedestrians. Everything else is false. Oh, and then personal mobility devices is also true. So you're counting pedestrians and people using personal mobility devices. And then again, here you can see how the flow type is different from all the other flow types, and the direction's different, and the side of the road is different. So you can see how these different combinations of your facility and flow types can lead to multiple metadata observations. After filling out your flow types, here we then move on to your detectors information. So again, here you can see up here, detectors is the level, and then jurisdiction is the attribute name. So jurisdiction, let's say it's the state DOT, but the org name, it's being the count's being done by the city. And again, the org name and the detectors matches the org name and the segment area. And because these are manual counts, you just put manual counts under all the other attributes that follow detectors in the detector category. And then you have the automated set to false. Again, here we've pre-populated the drop-down menu option. Here you have the flow detector, Latin long, and then you also, if there is no flow detector end date, you can leave that blank. The flow detector end date is only applied if the detector itself also changes. And then here we have generated the different unique meta IDs for each row of metadata observation. Once you've filled out the metadata, we would prefer it if you would save it as a CSV file. So I think you want to resave it, metadata, you can do SF sample, meta, and then you're going to want to save it as a CSV. We would prefer it if it was saved as a CSV file, but if you save it as an Excel file, that's okay as well. Let's now move on to the data template file and how that can be filled out. So here is the data template file with an example already in it. When you download the data template file from the documentation site, the examples that are shown in this tutorial are already in the template files, so to help you remember how to fill them out. So here we have the data template file. We have we have count data for two different flow detectors. So that's this right here. You can see the meta ID right here is different from the meta ID down here. And this particular meta ID, if you can remember, is from the meta ID in this row of metadata. So here you can see there is this is an example of the 2-hour duration, short manual counts at 15-minute intervals, start time, end time, measure period, and volume. Again, I want to reiterate the format of the start time and end time, year, month, day, hour, minute, second, and the time zone. Excel, again, is going to do something funny maybe when you first start entering in the start time, end time. You don't want that. So if that happens to you, please, you can go down here and list it as text, and it'll change that cell format into a text field, and it won't force you or do anything weird with the format provided here. I think that when you download the template file, you'll see that it's listed as general. I think it automatically does that because it's a nice Excel feature. So when you are working on this, you're going to often want to make sure it is converted to type text. Once you have added your data to this, you can either have all your data in one data file, or you can have your data spread out into multiple data files. What we ask is that it is, when you send us files, that it is one worksheet per file, or just save it as a CSV. Once your data and metadata have been uploaded into BikePed Portal, you will then be able to log in and see your data. Once you log into BikePed Portal, the first thing you'll see is the dashboard for your agency's data. On the left sidebar menu, you have the option to also download data. Because you signed the agreement form, you also have access to all the data from all the other agencies that are participating with BikePed Portal. To view the data that you're interested in from your agency, go to Explore BikePed Data under Data and Visualization. And here you can explore, you can search by state or by region. In this case, state, Washington. You can zoom into Clark County. And here you can see these are all manual counts as indicated by the key down here. You can select by either clicking on a location on the map or by searching for the location on the right sidebar menu. Click Explore, and then you can see the yearly manual count data for Clark County. To see the monthly data, you click on a year. In this case, there's only 1 month of data for a few days, and this is because this is a manual count location. So you can get the total volume per year, total volume per month, total volume per day. If you have finer granular level of data, you can get down to the hourly distribution. In this case, there's only 1 point of time, and this is probably because the data were bin to the 2-hour level. And with that, we'd like to acknowledge that this workshop was made possible through the Oregon Metro TISMO grant and support from transport agencies. We'd also like to thank the contribution of many researchers, staff, faculty, agency personnel, and students that have worked on this project for the past 10 years. If you have any additional questions at any point about the metadata or the data or how to get your data into BikePed Portal, or if you have any automatic counts that you are also interested in adding to our system, please let me know. Email is down below. Thank you.